If you're experiencing some pain right now or have recently, if you haven't already, please ask yourself the question, what can I learn from this? If you don't, unfortunately, you're just those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. I think the saying goes. Right?
Absolutely.
So just make sure if you're in a pain season or just came out of one, please reflect on what just happened and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Welcome to the High Voltage Business Builders Podcast, a show where we interview high voltage entrepreneurs growing and scaling through e-commerce, real estate, and other wealth without Wall Street ventures, showing you the path to making your first or next million.
All right, folks, welcome back to the High Voltage Business Builders Podcast. We're going to talk today again a little bit about land flipping. I've had a couple of guests on the past who talked about it. There's a slightly different strategy that we're going to talk about today in terms of this market. But I think if you're interested in any kind of online, offline, or wealth building mechanisms, we should understand now from being on this podcast, if you've watched any episodes, that building a business or getting in real estate are the two main ways people get rich. And so if you're going to do one of these things to achieve financial freedom in the world, you might do land flipping, you might do e-commerce, you might flip e-commerce virtual real estate, or you might do a combination of both going one direction or another. So that's why we talk about these kinds of things on this podcast and why I've got a guest here today who's going to talk a little bit about those. So AJ, welcome to the call, brother. Let's dig in.
Let's dig in. Let's do it, Neil. Super excited.
All right. So we were just talking about the combination of lead and generation. And obviously we were talking about the 100 million offer book you've got sitting behind you. You're obviously a student of learning and knowledge. Tell me some more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I learned pretty quickly that you're never going to know it all. I'll tell you, I'm a pretty young guy. I'm 25. And I remember as a kid thinking to myself, okay, Ajay, like if you were to sit down and read every single book on the planet, could you do it? Is there enough time? The answer is unfortunately no, which is extremely disappointing. When I was 7, as I got older, you start getting into the other books. Think and Grow Rich is one that comes to mind. In that, the author Napoleon Hill demonstrates a great story from Mr. Henry Ford, right? Founder of Ford, which all of us are pretty familiar with. And that story talks about a newspaper article, and I promise this is full circle here, but it has a newspaper article stating that Henry Ford is stupid, essentially, and incompetent. And so he sues them for libel. In order to prove his case, he's got to show them that it's a false defamatory statement, thereby having to prove his competency and his intelligence. And so they start grilling him on arithmetic and history and all these things, and eventually he just explodes. And Henry Ford says, I have 12 buttons on my desk, and at any moment I can push every single one of them. And a man who is extremely knowledgeable and competent in any one of those 12 subjects is going to come to my door and answer my questions. Why would I waste my time learning all these things when I can summon these men who devoted their lives into these topics, right? And so that really stuck with me for a couple different reasons. One of the biggest ones being books are the biggest hack on this planet, in other forms of education, right? Courses, coaching, whatever it is out there. But if you can take industry experts and their lives that they use to consolidate what they deem the most valuable lessons from their lives and their careers, and I can get that value in 6 to 15 hours of sitting down and studying, and truthfully more than that, because then you've got to go implement the things you're learning in your business, and possibly you reread certain books. Like right now I'm studying Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. But all that to say, that story really stuck with me when I read that book about 3 years ago, and I'm just super excited that I had the opportunity to get into these books at my fingertips and go implement and iterate in my businesses. I'm not sure if that's what you were going for there, but that's what comes to mind in terms
No,
of
it is. I mean, because the aspect of what you're talking about is there's intrinsic and tacit knowledge, and how do we move one to another and gain information in multiple places. Some of us are more visual, some are more auditory, some can read and learn, and then most people need some combination of that to actually gain knowledge and learn. And you've learned for yourself, there's different ways of gaining that knowledge that you can actually take and execute. Many people need that one-on-one support. Many people need that guidance. And it's tough at times because we know the world is full of scammers, and we know that that's a big thing. If you mention, well, I coach people on how to do XYZ, all of a sudden they're like, well, are you a scam?
Yeah.
But it's like, well, no, not everybody who does what they do is a scam. And not everybody can manipulate in some way, shape, or form. It's not really the truth of it all. It's easy to get caught up in that because you try to instill value and knowledge. But by that same token, as you have learned and I have learned, the knowledge that we paid for in our life has sometimes come at a very expensive cost to us in that learning process. Have you had some of those in your learning curve?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, gosh, in 2022 alone, I probably spent about 6 figures in different courses, seminars, paid webinars, events, coaching, all the things, right? And if you do enough of anything, unfortunately, you're just going to get burned a couple of times.
Well, you like business, right? We were laughing about this the other night because I was talking to my kids about business around the table. And I said, look, if you've been in business long enough, you're going to find an enemy.
Absolutely.
You're probably going to get sued at least once, maybe twice if you're trying hard enough. And then someone's not going to like you. It's just the way that it works, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Nature of the beast. I will tell you, again, I'm young. I'm still green in the lawsuit world. I've not been sued yet, knock on wood. I just know it's coming.
Keep pushing.
Yeah, exactly. There's a good Gary V quote. Anybody that doesn't know Gary Vaynerchuk, get on the internet. He says, if you aren't pissing people off, you're not marketing enough. Is that language okay here?
No, that's okay. No, absolutely. Yeah. He's right to a degree. It's not because you're trying to create inflammatory responses out of people. It's not like you're trying to hurt people with what you're doing or you're trying to manipulate them. Really, at the end of the day, if you're doing a great job and being, honest and acting in integrity, it's just somebody is just not going to like you. And you got to put your big boy pants on, as my girls say, in their world, because I have girls in my house. Is put your big girl panties on and get out there. Which I feel that sort of works both ways, I think, in today's world. And get out there and operate, right?
Absolutely.
And do what you do best. And in time will tell, and integrity will shine through to those who don't.
Absolutely.
But where do you find yourself going in that? So at 25 and getting developed and getting moving, you've kind of found a niche early on that you come, I think, to love, I would say, or at least enjoy enough that you're willing to do it all the time.
Right.
Where is that? Is it love and joy? Is it just something you fell into? Is it like what you want to do for the rest of your life? Like, where are you at?
Yeah, it's a great question, Neil. I'll tell you, man, I'm so young. 3 years ago, I started my first business. And so a lot of people ask me that question, and I'll tell you, I'm going to be in business for the rest of my life. I love business. And I enjoy what I do a lot. I know how to flip land. I understand arbitrage. What I find more valuable is I recognize I am just in a season where I need to learn business fundamentals more than everything. Okay. So like what I mean by that is when I started hiring, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I have literally no idea how to do this. And so what do? You pay an agency. And so I would pay an agency. But beyond that, I would say, hey guys, can you walk me through, how do you go through your recruiting process? Right?
Yeah.
What are you using to vet good employees? One of our favorite tactics out of it is what we call, it's the blue M&M test, right? Like, if they read the whole job description, like email blue M&M or whatever to show that you actually read the whole thing. What we do is just like include your favorite color and your stage of life in your introductory message or email on job postings. But the reason I'm saying all this is just because I recognize I don't know a lot of the fundamentals of business. I'm at a point now where I understand some at a decent level, but hiring, training, management, leadership, sales, negotiation, marketing, all that stuff is universal in business. And I'm in a season right now where I'm taking the lessons from what I'm doing with land, and I recognize that they understand to macro business principles. I wouldn't be surprised if in 15 years I were running like a private equity company. I really, really enjoy just like business fundamentals and working on strategy, like most entrepreneurs that like shiny object syndrome, right? I really like strategy. I really like talking vision. I really enjoy those things, which also means I need to partner with really good operators a lot of times. And so that really excites me. But right now I've got a team of 5 and a business partner in my land business, and I am having a ton of fun learning the business fundamentals, connecting with my team, growing the business through just good lead management, good marketing, good sales, good leadership. Well, to the best of my ability, good is relative, right?
Well, I think, good. What's good, right? Good is someone else's definition. The effect of it is even in time, okay, because I'm 47, but at this point, here's one thing I've actually learned that I didn't know when I was 25.
Please.
And that was to actually find people that I can trust more who have the knowledge and find out they have the knowledge and just find a way to get involved with them and then let them keep that knowledge. I don't need to have every answer anymore. And it is a better part of my life. I struggled to be the guy who had all the answers. Like I wanted all the answers. And then I realized that was more prideful and arrogant of me to try to feel like I could do that. It's kind of the old joke of a master of all trades, jack of all trades and master of none.
Yep.
And you get down to that realization, and it's really where most success will come from other people who you have either enabled, empowered, or shared knowledge in some way with them, and they have the ability to be the expert, and that's what they're very good at, and then get out of their way. That's a really hard thing to do at times, isn't it? Just to get out of the way of the things you don't know and let others do what they do best.
Absolutely. And that's so valuable. Something we've shifted recently. So this is still super new, raw, fresh for us, Neil, is with our team. For so long, we thought running a team was like telling them what to do. And I just learned very quickly when we started hiring, I was like, man, and now I screen for this in my interviews, but I didn't at the time, is guys, I don't want to be a manager. I'm hiring you as an adult to do your job. And you come to me when you have questions and need support. We're going to set the standards and expectations. We're going to have support available for you. We're going to have daily touch points. We're going to do whatever we need to do to make sure we can continue moving the needle and measuring success and whatever that looks like. However, you're an adult, do your job, and we're not going to have problems, right? You make me have to manage you, and we're going to have a different conversation. And so giving them the permission to go run and do their job. And here's a really, really big one. I work with a coach in leadership. Her name's Jenny Hudspeth. She works particularly with real estate investors, and she really helped us with this, was inviting your team into problem solving with you. So we would run into an issue in the business, and it would be like, hey, instead of exactly what you're talking about, I have to be the guy with all the answers, right? Because everybody's looking to us and trying to figure it out. Well, what do you think? Just flipping the frame. Exactly, right?
And asking questions is extremely powerful, and we forget that technique, don't we? Because absolutely. In a world that constantly pushes things out, you don't always receive things. And it's not even just as a manager or a business owner, but just down into the content and the things that we see and do. And it's funny that you mentioned the blue-green M&M thing. It's literally, people will come to us and they will say, hey, I want to take your course. And I'm like, well, I don't sell a course. Did you not read the material? Did you not watch the whole video? And you find out more often than not, people are so inundated 80% of the time with so much information, they only gather about 20% of what they think is actually happening, and then bring that reality to you. And then you have to recreate that reality in their mind. You have to shift that narrative back. How do you avoid that? How are you avoiding that in your business? And how are you seeing your way through that with the people you're hiring?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, and this is going to sound so mushy, but the biggest thing is standards/expectations paired with culture fit. Okay. Now, I recognize that sounds mushy, so I'm going to unpack it. All right. With regards to standards, I was having a good conversation with a friend of mine, Annie, and we were talking about what standards do you have in your life that you maybe don't communicate and you just expect to be done. For me, it's, hey, if you're leaving a room, turn the light off. Nobody else is in the room, right? Now, there's other people in there, of course, leave it on. One most people can relate to is you have a way you like the toilet paper facing, right? It's either out or it's the other way around, right? But it's, who did this the wrong way? Well, who knew it was the wrong way? You didn't set that standard, right? So you need to do the same thing on your team. If you have either a particular way it's being done now, it's not always the right way, right? Which is a whole separate conversation. But the point being that standard needs to be set. Those expectations need to be very clearly defined. There's a really, really good, I know we've got $100 million offers up here, really, really good Alex Hormozy video about when employees aren't doing what you expect them to do. He's kind of got this triangle he defines, and I'm drawing a blank on what all three of these pieces are, but it's expectations, it's training, and maybe management. Motivation. I think those are the three things of why employees do or don't do something. Did they know they were supposed to do it? Did you train them correctly on whether they're doing it? Have you incentivized them correctly to get the thing done, right? If you focus on those three things, people will do what you want them to do as long as you've got the right person in the right seat, which we're blowing through all this in a 90-second description. That is a very, very dense topic you and I could sit down for 3 hours and unpack. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I simplified it by simply getting rid of employees. So yeah, I just did.
Okay.
And now I have a whole operational crew that are contractors. And they're not just contractors. They're actually people that we raised up into the business, trained them to become business experts through the fundamentals, through the pro side of it, till they can actually run the operation completely themselves. And they're now able to teach others how to do it.
That's great.
And so we've simply contracted them to our business, to our coaching, to our operations, to other components of our models. And they're kind of like hired guns who already were subject matter experts because we trained them to become it and then they did it. So now I don't have employees, I have hired guns. So when I say I'm not the smartest guy in the room anymore, I'm literally not the smartest guy in the room anymore. That's so great. I don't get to mess with some of those things, and I don't touch base with them on what's your 15 minutes objective this week. It's I watch them work in their objectives and I don't need me to micromanage them.
That's awesome.
Right? You talk about being at the macro level. The macro level was installed at the brand. It was installed in their willingness to get in with us and work alongside of us until they became more than apprentices. They became business people. And at the end of that, they do what they do. And it takes a long time and a lot of time to dedicate to people in order to make that happen, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and you can do the same thing with employees. You just have to remember that in our mind, there's a lot of things we realize that we put on people that aren't really true. Like, you could call someone an employee, but you can't make them loyal to the company.
Correct.
Right? You can't make them loyal to the brand. You can't make them loyal to what you're doing.
Absolutely.
The goal first is to do the diligence and long enough with them that they become sort of instilled in the idea of the brand to the point that they want to sell you, that the business they can do is better than you hiring somebody else. And then you give them a chance to find out if that's true. And then you fire fast.
Right. Absolutely.
Like the old adage of take a long time to hire and fire fast.
Hire slow and fire fast.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
It is a big thing that I have learned in the years doing business, that you will be, it hurts less to pull the Band-Aid off faster than it does to try to reinstill culture or reinstill methodologies or reinstill work ethics or reinstill the business mission than it is to just say, you know what, I think you're not a great fit for this. I'm sorry it's not working out. I don't think we're great for you. And maybe there'd be a better company for you to go find, because I don't think we're going to be successful with you.
That's so great.
And then pull that Band-Aid and let it roll. Right? Because people don't, you don't understand what that means. Because you're like, well, I invested all this time and energy in getting them going. And I thought they were going to be this amazing person. And then I spent 4 months trying to change all that. 4 months, right? Or 6 months, or maybe a year. In the meantime, everybody else who's already there is like, why is this loser still around?
Right.
Why? They're dragging the culture down. They're dragging the environment. They're dragging the productivity down. This is just, I'm pontificating a little bit, but
no, I love it.
The end result is you learn those things over time and execution and failure.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And I just want to touch base on that culture piece. I mentioned it earlier and forgot to drive to it. Like, number one, we are anal about culture with who we hire in-house. Then you're mentioning contractors. Obviously, the way you're running your business, it's super important that these business people, as you called them, fit in that culture, right? And I think it's Traction by Gino Wickman says culture and core values are what you hire and fire based off of. And so like in our business, the 3 core values we live and die by, they're a little mushy. Again, that's like what they are. But anybody that's ever created an organization realizes that like if you don't proactively create the culture will be created. You just didn't set the tone, right? It came to be. And
you
so
didn't
for us,
set the tonality. And that's where that overarching basic direction, and as the guy, the CEO, the leader of the company is supposed to kind of set the cadence for the culture that then will eventually weed itself into a direction you hope or pray or drive as much as possible.
Exactly. And so like for us, it's we're dependent on dependability is number one. So can I count on you? If I can't count on you, it's really, really hard for us to work together, right? Number 2 is enthusiasm. Listen, guys, like for me to be a leader for you is a privilege. In the same sense, it's a privilege for you to work here, right? And like, don't get me wrong, I recognize like it's a job and I don't expect you to like devote your entire life to this, especially with like our pay bands and the way the roles are described and like how we're hiring and stuff. So I'm not asking people to bend over backwards and sacrifice their souls, but I want you to be excited when you're here. If you're not excited, you don't need to be here. It's as simple as that, right? And then you have a growth mindset. Yeah. Again, very mushy, but we're trying to get better every day, not do the same thing every day. If you just want somewhere where you fall into your routines and then never learn a thing again, wrong place. Go work at a title company. Okay. So,
you can't have culture without the productivity. And if you get too much productivity and they're a high performer, but they don't fit the culture, that's out of balance. You've got to work someone one direction or another until they're in balance with both the culture and productivity.
Exactly.
And that is a challenge, especially in today's world, because it just seems that the more and more I listen to my friends who have employees 10, 20, 50 or more, the more they are struggling to instill that value in their culture.
I will also
finding that
say,
too
like,
on your side.
Sorry, the new generation, and I'd speak about this as part of it, right? But like my peers that I grew up with are just, I hope I don't get canceled here, but just so entitled. Everybody like expects employers to bend over backwards for them and accommodate to them. There's some flexibility in there, don't get me wrong, but there's some jobs that are just demanding. And it's okay for work to be demanding. Just know what you signed up for, right? Like an employment agreement is exactly that. It's an agreement, right? And make sure both parties know what they're signing up for and just be very clear on those expectations and standards like we talked about. And ideally, there aren't surprises later on. At the same time, it kind of excites me as a 25-year-old because I'm like, man, if everybody here is doing this whole quiet quitting trend, I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
But
the quiet quitting trend? I haven't heard of this. No, enlighten me.
Yeah. So it's this thing that little younger millennials and then like Gen Z, which unfortunately is my generation, is doing where they're effectively saying, oh, well, I'm probably out of this role in 3 months. And so I'm going to do the absolute bare minimum for my job. I'm going to show up to meetings only when people put them on my calendar. I'm only going to do work if I absolutely have to. But it is like, how do I do the bare minimum at my job? And it's called quiet quitting, because you're not actually quitting, but you're not really an above average employee by any standard, right? And so it's this big thing. I mean, if you look it up, there's articles on this by probably like Forbes and some of the bigger places, and it's huge on like TikTok and Instagram, and all these people are posting about it. And you hear it in regular conversation. Like I hear it when I talk to people my age, like, oh, like I'm gonna be quiet quitting for the next 3 months. And I'm like, why? Why would you not like invest into something and at least develop your skills and like, yeah, like what can I learn from this? You know what I mean? But that's the generation. And so like, I just think I'm gonna crush. I'm gonna play the game for the next 80 years as long as my mind and body let me, right? And so I'm just gonna dominate and have a great time doing it.
Well, and I appreciate that, because I've ran into both sides, and it's nice to meet someone your age who's actually out there and understands and is working against the grain. Is that something that you just are naturally inclined to do? Is that something that you have started to learn to do? Is that something that was instilled in your family or your familia culture? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I was raised by a single mother, and I think that's a big part of it. Is I was raised by a single mother in an Asian household. My family's from Nepal, a small country in between China and India. And so when I was growing up, it's just like work wasn't optional. You know what I mean? And we owned a small business. Right. And so from the age of 10 on, I was in a gas station working the register, and it wasn't a choice, right? So very early on, I was like, okay, working is it's not something you either do or don't do. It's okay, how am I going to do this? And then when you become an adult, I mean, you're effectively needing money in some function. But I think the fallacy people fall into is that you like have to trade your time for money, essentially, is like the easiest way to boil that down, right? Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think that's a pretty familiar topic to everybody. And so anyways, at a young age, though, I saw modeled for me that work wasn't optional, that you showed up regardless of good days or bad days, which I think is so valuable. So valuable. Like, you don't think I want to take a mental health day? You don't think I have days where I'm anxious or depressed or feel like garbage? Right?
Who isn't it, dude? That's just life. We all experience it. It's life.
You got to figure out how to show up and control your emotions, and you're going to have bad days. It's just a function of being a human, right? And so,
pretty much. We don't all walk on water, dude. There was only one person that did that.
Yeah, exactly.
No, you have to. And entrepreneurialism, it's always a fun word to say, it is a roller coaster. Yeah. And we all have it, even if we've been at it for 20 years. At the end of the day, there are just moments in time. There are windows in time. There are even weeks, sometimes even days where you're just like, wee. And then the next day you're like, oh, I suck. And all the world, I hate all the world. Then you're like, wee. It's like, it's not for the faint of heart. If you don't like roller coasters, you probably don't want to be an entrepreneur.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you're looking for stability, you're in the wrong career. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs I talk to. And that's a big reason I think these recurring revenue businesses are so sexy right now. Is like, especially like Russell Brunson has caught on huge heat over the past 10, 15 years with what he's doing with ClickFunnels and everything else. And I think he's brilliant and a great marketer. But I think a big allure of what he teaches is, hey guys, you can run these small membership businesses where you get this recurring revenue. And it's so sexy because you have that stability, right? But if you just commit to the process, like I recognize I'm going to have feast and famine. I've already been through a couple of waves of it, only being in business for a couple of years. So now, thankfully, I got hit kind of hard when interest rates went up and everybody was scared of everything. And so cash just wasn't flowing and all my money was in land. And so I just put all my chips in and it wasn't a great move. But now I'm a little bit more risk adverse in the way that, okay, let's set aside some cash for living expenses, right? Okay, I can live off 2 years of savings if I do this, and I live pretty modestly. And I don't do anything crazy, Neil. I make more money than most people my age, but my expenses are pretty low generally. I mean, I own my car and I rent a house and I don't do anything super extravagant. I like to eat out. That's probably the most expensive thing I do is I enjoy a good dinner every now and then. But
well, I mean, unless you're going to be a cook, that's okay. Right? But what you've kind of experienced is, and I will redefine something I said a second ago only to clarify. When I say entrepreneur, what I really mean is someone who's still in the process of establishing a business or a line of service or a thing that will they'll stay within that framework probably for the rest of their career to some degree, which means you're a business owner. There's a difference between entrepreneur and business owner. If you say there's a serial entrepreneur, it's typically somebody who's either investing or growing up companies repeatedly in a process of repetition, where those of us who've kind of figured out what our lane is, where we're going to stay, and then we can be creative within that lane, we're business owners. Right? It changes. And I think so many people misuse the word entrepreneur because they think that that's where the glory is. And actually that's where all the risk is.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, right? Once you establish those boundaries, like you have been establishing, you just named some boundaries that you have decided where your risk is in your life, you're going to have more reward because now you have wisdom. you took knowledge through execution and have become more wise. And the fact is, you've risked something to get there. And if anybody's listening to this call today, you can't jump from a job or one other thing into full risk and not try to see the forest through the trees. You must understand there is risk in that. There is no guarantee. The reward comes through work, and it will have highs and lows, right? No matter what you do. You don't win the lottery in business. The lottery grows over time. Right. And I think so many people think if I just start a business, I'll win the lottery. That's not how it works, right?
Definitely not. And I think just to add a couple of things here. Number one is if you're in, Steve Harvey has a good quote. If you're in hell right now, keep going. Why would you stop in hell? But
yeah, the country song about that too, I think.
Oh, really? Even
yeah, the one if you're going through hell, keep on going.
Okay. Even beyond.
Oh, you gotta listen to country, man. Come on.
I do listen to some. I don't know that song.
Okay,
I know newer country.
We gotta get more educated.
Yeah, I gotta.
No, it's okay. We gotta get more educated, more culture.
I'm on it, man. I live in Texas now, so I gotta brush up.
Yeah. Dude, yeah, absolutely.
Particularly the Ray Dalio, Bridgewater Capital, right? Big hedge fund guy. He's got this really good formula, if you will, where he says pain plus reflection equals growth. And I used to have it up on my whiteboard. I don't anymore because I moved recently. But the takeaway there is, guys, if you're experiencing some pain right now or have recently, if you haven't already, please ask yourself the question, what can I learn from this? If you don't, unfortunately, you're just those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat it. I think the saying goes. Right?
Absolutely.
So just make sure if you're in a pain season or just came out of one, please reflect on what just happened and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, look, my man, this has been a great combo, and I literally think we could keep talking for another 30 minutes. But let's get specific for a few more minutes here for you specifically. Who are you hiring for and the purpose in which you're hiring?
Yep. A majority of stuff we're doing is sales reps, acquisitions more particularly. So we do some U.S., some overseas. We've got a couple of Filipino VAs, one from Nicaragua, and then 2 in the U.S. And then I've got an EA. And so those reps, though, are folks that are in some level helping us buy property is the easiest way to say it. So somewhere in the acquisitions pipeline, they are focused in buying property. When I mentor some folks and kind of, again, focus on fundamentals, that's primarily who we're hiring. Those is, I would say, salespeople. That sales is big, and more particularly, we're buying, but it takes a sales and negotiation skill set in order to buy effectively.
Yeah, that's good. And so land flipping and business, I mean, are you acquiring businesses or you're just acquiring the land as a part of your business, just to get clear?
Yeah, no, just flipping land as a part of my business. I would love to get into business flipping down the line. I think that's my pie in the sky place to get to in 10, 15 years. It's not anything I'm taking actionable step towards right now. Right now, I'm just really focused on what business fundamentals do I need to learn.
Absolutely.
And land flipping is a vehicle that's proved to be lucrative right now.
Well, when the time comes, if you want to talk about it, let me know, because we're in the M&A side of e-commerce, if you ever want to talk about business. But like you said, fundamentals of business across the board, whether in land or e-com or in finance or whatever, at the end of the day, it's a numbers game. It's business. It's just a different P&L with a different service, different product, different outcome. And once you understand those fundamentals, you can go a long way. And you're well on your way to doing that, AJ. So I'm really great we had this conversation. I'm glad we had this conversation. It was a great conversation. I sincerely appreciate you coming and joining me.
Likewise, Neil. This was a pleasure.
All right, my man. Good job.
That was awesome.
Ask you this. If you're serious about building an e-commerce business starting on Amazon FBA, what if myself and my team worked with you one-on-one to execute the steps outlined in the podcast while helping you discover what the heck to sell, how to make sure it's profitable, and how to successfully launch a brand, plus how to do it under a consulting plus performance-driven model where I put a $10,000 skin in the game guarantee for those that show up and are serious about building a real business done with us? If yes, text keyword profit to +1 417 413 4209. That's 1-417 413 4209. And I will personally respond with a few simple questions. If you're not in the US or Canada, please visit voltagedm.com. That's voltagedm.com. Click Get Started and book a no-pressure discovery call with me or a member of my team to learn more about the Business Builders one-on-one coaching and mentoring for CEOs, entrepreneurs, and those looking to build an empire or retire using the power of e-commerce. Once again, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode of the High Voltage Business Builders podcast.